Good afternoon, friends. Today we will analyze one of the most important questions of 2026. What will happen to the world economy when the special military operation in Ukraine finally ends? Will it be a peace treaty, a ceasefire, or a frozen conflict? We will consider realistic scenarios based on data from experts, reports of the International Monetary Fund, the World Bank, the Center for Economic and Social Research, the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, and Russian and Ukrainian analysts as of spring 2026. No one knows the exact date, but let us assume that hostilities cease in 2026 or 2027. What awaits Russia, Ukraine, Europe, the United States of America, China, and the whole world? Who will suffer huge losses, who will hit the jackpot, and how the global economy will change? Let us figure it out step by step. This is not a forecast from the Kremlin or Kiev, but an objective analysis of figures and trends. First, the general consequences of the war by 2026. According to estimates, the global economy has already lost about $2.8 trillion due to rising prices for energy carriers, food, and disruption of supply chains. Ukraine has suffered direct physical damage exceeding $195 billion, while full reconstruction is estimated at $588 billion over the next decade. This is almost 3 annual gross domestic products of the country before the war. Russia has rebuilt its economy on a war footing. Military spending has risen to 6 to 8% of gross domestic product. The military-industrial complex is giving growth, but civilian sectors are declining. The budget deficit is approaching 3.8 or 4.4% of gross domestic product. Oil and gas revenues have collapsed by 50% in some months due to sanctions and discounts. Europe has experienced an energy crisis, deindustrialization, and rising inflation. The United States of America has increased exports of liquefied natural gas and weapons. China and India bought Russian oil at a discount. Now imagine the fighting has stopped. What next? Scenario 1. Full peace with partial lifting of sanctions. An optimistic scenario with a probability of about 30 to 40% according to analysts. Negotiations under the auspices of the United States of America or China lead to a ceasefire, partial withdrawal of troops, and unfreezing of part of the assets. Sanctions are eased but not completely. Russia remains under some restrictions. Russia. Military spending will be cut immediately. According to expert calculations, full zeroing of the increase in the state defense order will give minus 1.6 or 1.8% of gross domestic product in the first 1.5 to 2 years. A smooth reduction will lead to stagnation or a decline of 1% per year for the first 2 years. The army will be demobilized. Hundreds of thousands of people will return to the labor market. Resources will be freed for infrastructure, social programs, and civilian production. If sanctions are eased, part of imports will return, the ruble will stabilize, but imports will grow and the ruble may weaken. Oil and gas revenues will rise at normal prices. The long-term risk is that the war economy is deeply embedded and it is difficult to return to the pre-war model. Restructuring will take 2 to 4 years, but without collapse. Losses are lost technologies, brain drain, and demography. Profit, if markets open, then growth of investments from Asia. Ukraine. Reconstruction becomes the main driver. $588 billion is billions for roads, energy, housing, and factories. The first years are a boom. Gross domestic product growth of 4 to 7% according to optimistic forecasts. Frozen Russian assets of about $300 billion can go toward recovery. However, debt exceeds 110% of gross domestic product, budget deficit, energy crisis, outflow of population and personnel. The army will be demobilized. This is a plus for the workforce but a minus for budget expenditures. Agriculture and metallurgy will recover quickly when ports open. Profit is integration into the European Union and investments from the West. Losses in the first months are shock, inflation, and unemployment among military personnel. Europe. Cheap Russian gas will return partially. Energy prices will fall, and the industry of Germany and Italy will breathe a sigh of relief. But Europe has already invested hundreds of billions in liquefied natural gas terminals and renewable energy. Plus, growth of defense spending to 2 to 3% of gross domestic product under NATO. Losses during the war are deindustrialization and rising prices. Russia. Structural problems, sanctions, and overheating of the economy. Long-term damage is lagging in technology and demography. Europe, especially Germany, Italy, and Eastern Europe. Energy crisis, growth of debts, and loss of competitiveness. Billions for aid and defense. The Global South. Rising food prices during the war hit poor countries. Countries that profit or have smaller losses. The United States of America. Exports of liquefied natural gas, weapons, and geopolitical strengthening. China. Cheap resources, expansion of influence in Eurasia, and weakening of competitors. India, Turkey, and some Asian countries. Reorientation of trade and discounts on Russian goods. Manufacturers of weapons and companies in renewable energy in Europe. How the global economy will change. First, energy. Diversification. Russia will lose part of the European market forever. Liquefied natural gas from the United States of America, Qatar, and renewable energy are the winners. Second, trade. New corridors through India and China. De-dollarization will accelerate, but slowly. Third, defense industry. All NATO countries and others will increase spending. A new market worth trillions. Fourth, reconstruction. Ukraine will become the construction side of Europe. Contracts for construction and engineering firms. Fifth, technologies and investments. Russia will go deeper into import substitution and Asia. The West will strengthen control over critical technologies. Sixth, inflation and growth. The first 1 to 2 years will see volatility. Then stabilization. Global gross domestic product will receive a peace dividend of plus 0.5 to 1% growth in the world according to some models. In the long term after 2030, the world will become more multipolar. Russia, if it adapts, will find a niche in raw materials and the military-industrial complex. Ukraine will become an agrarian-industrial hub of the European Union. Europe will be stronger in defense but weaker economically. The United States of America and China will remain the main players. Of course, everything depends on the conditions of peace, territorial issues, security guarantees, and reparations. If the peace is fair, everyone wins. If not, new conflicts are possible. What do you think? Write in the comments which scenario is more likely. Like if the video was useful. Subscribe. We analyze the economy without propaganda. Until next time.